Kate Reynolds ripped off her wedding ring and dropped it into the judge's hand. "I want nothing," she said. Her husband Richard laughed out loud. His 26-year-old mistress giggled beside him. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Everyone thought Kate had surrendered. They were wrong. That ring was the last chain holding her back, and in exactly 30 days, Richard Harrington would discover that the worthless housewife he had just humiliated owned every single dollar of his empire. If you want to see how one woman's silence became the most devastating weapon in New York history, subscribe now and stay until the end. Drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Kate Reynolds stood alone. The defendant's table felt like an island in a sea of sharks. She kept her hands folded in her lap, her back straight, her face perfectly still. 23 years of marriage had taught her how to hide everything behind a mask. Richard sat 10 feet away. He was whispering something to his lawyer, a woman named Victoria Chase, who had never lost a high-profile divorce case in 15 years. Victoria's heels cost more than most people's monthly rent. Her smile cost even more. Richard's arm was draped casually over the back of his chair. He looked relaxed. Why wouldn't he? He had already won. "Mr. Harrington contends," Victoria announced, her voice cutting through the courtroom like a surgical blade, "that the defendant has contributed precisely nothing to the valuation of Harrington Technologies." She held up a thick folder. Kate recognized it. She had seen Richard's team assembling it for months. During their 23-year marriage, Mrs. Harrington had no employment record, no assets in her own name. She lived entirely off the generosity of my client. Kate didn't move. "The prenuptial agreement is ironclad, Your Honor. She leaves with what she came with." Victoria paused for effect. "Nothing." The gallery murmured. Kate felt their eyes on her. She knew what they were thinking. Gold digger, trophy wife, a woman who had grabbed onto a rising star and held on for dear life until he shook her off. None of them knew the truth. Judge Patricia Coleman peered over her glasses. She was a veteran of the family court, 62 years old, and she had seen every kind of divorce imaginable. But even she looked uncomfortable. "Mrs. Harrington," the judge said carefully, "do you have any response to these claims?" Kate looked at Richard. He was smiling. That confident, charming smile that had made her fall in love with him in 1995. The same smile he had used to close billion-dollar deals. The same smile he had given Brittany Cole when he thought Kate wasn't watching. Kate stood up slowly. "No, Your Honor," she said. Her voice was steady. "I accept the terms." The courtroom went silent. Even Victoria Chase looked stunned. She had prepared for war. She had expected Kate to fight for alimony for the house in the Hamptons for something. Richard leaned forward. His smile flickered. This wasn't what he had expected either. "You accept?" Judge Coleman asked. "You understand what this means? No alimony, no claim to any marital property, no stock options, nothing." "I understand," Kate said. "May I ask why?" Kate looked at Richard one more time. She memorized his expression, the confusion, the suspicion, the tiny seed of doubt growing behind his eyes. "Good." "I want nothing from Mr. Harrington," Kate said clearly. "I only request that my maiden name be restored immediately. I wish to be Kate Reynolds again." Richard laughed. The sound echoed through the courtroom. "Let her have the name," he said loud enough for everyone to hear. "It's the only thing she's got left." Brittany giggled beside him. She was wearing a diamond ring that was bigger than the one Richard had given Kate 23 years ago. She couldn't have been more than 26, young enough to be Kate's daughter. The gavel came down. "So ordered," Judge Coleman said. "Divorce granted." The courtroom erupted. Reporters rushed toward the aisle. Cameras flashed. Richard stood up and buttoned his jacket, immediately surrounded by his team. "Mr. Harrington, how does it feel to be a free man?" "It feels profitable," Richard said, flashing his famous smile. He pulled Brittany close. "And I've got the future right here." Kate gathered her papers. Her hands didn't shake. Her face didn't change. Richard walked toward her. He stopped close enough that she could smell his cologne. The same cologne she had bought him for their 10th anniversary. "You were smart to give up Kate," he whispered. "For a moment there, I thought you might actually try to fight. That would have been embarrassing for you." Kate didn't respond. "I mean, what were you going to say?" Richard continued. "That you helped, that you contributed." He laughed softly. "Nobody's going to believe that the woman who spent 20 years making casseroles and organizing charity dinners had anything to do with building a tech empire." Kate looked up at him. For just 1 second the mask slipped, and Richard saw something in her eyes that he couldn't identify. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't anger. It was something else entirely. "Goodbye, Richard," Kate said quietly. "Enjoy what you've won." She turned and walked toward the side exit, avoiding the reporters slipping out into the hallway. Richard watched her go. For a moment he felt something cold in his chest. A whisper of doubt. Then Brittany tugged on his arm. "Babe, the press is waiting. Come on, let's celebrate." Richard shook off the feeling. He had won. He had everything. Kate had nothing. He walked out the front door into a storm of camera flashes, Brittany on his arm, the king of New York, returning to his throne. D'abord. Kate didn't go home. She walked 3 blocks to a parking garage. On the 4th level, a black car was waiting. Not a limousine, nothing flashy, just a simple sedan with tinted windows. She got in the back. "It's done," she said. The driver didn't turn around. He was an older man, early 60s, with silver hair and an English accent. "How do you feel, ma'am?" Kate leaned her head back against the seat. She closed her eyes. "I feel like I've been holding my breath for 23 years, she said. "And I just started breathing again." "The apartment in Queens is ready. Shall I take you there?" "Yes." The car pulled out of the garage and merged into Manhattan traffic. Kate opened her eyes and looked out the window. The city moved past her like a river. She had walked these streets as Richard Harrington's wife. She had attended galas, smiled for photographs, stood silently beside him at press conferences. Now, she was nobody. A 52-year-old woman with no job, no home, and officially no money. At least, that's what the world believed. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Transfer complete. All assets secured under Reynolds Trust." Kate allowed herself a small smile. Richard thought he had stripped her of everything. He thought she was walking away with nothing but her maiden name and the clothes on her back. He had no idea that Kate Reynolds was worth more than Richard Harrington had ever dreamed of becoming. 3 hours later, Kate stood in the middle of a cramped apartment in Queens. The paint was peeling. The radiator clanked like a dying engine. The view from the single window was a brick wall. Any other divorced wife might have collapsed in despair. Kate walked to the closet. Inside, behind a rack of cheap clothes from Goodwill, was a biometric safe. She pressed her thumb to the scanner. The safe clicked open. Inside were 3 high-powered laptops, a satellite phone, and a folder marked classified. She pulled out the folder and spread its contents on the kitchen table. Documents, financial records, corporate filings going back 23 years, and in the center of it all, a single photograph. It showed a young Richard Harrington, 30 years old, signing papers in a Zurich bank. He was shaking hands with a man whose face was hidden from the camera. But Kate knew who that man was. Her father, Harrison Reynolds, founder of Reynolds Steel Corporation, a man whose fortune was so old, so vast, that it didn't appear on any public list because the family paid to keep it that way. Kate had walked away from that fortune when she was 29 years old. She had wanted to live a normal life. She had wanted to find love based on who she was, not what she owned. She had met Richard at a coffee shop in Boston. He had been charming, ambitious, brilliant. He had dreams of building something that would change the world. Kate had believed in him. When Richard needed capital to start his company, Kate had made a single phone call to her father. 3 days later, $15 million appeared in a Zurich account routed through a shell company called EV Holdings. Richard never knew where the money really came from. He thought it was from a consortium of anonymous Swiss investors. He thought he had earned it through his brilliant pitch. He had no idea that his entire empire was built on Kate's family money. And now, 23 years later, Kate was going to take it all back. Her phone rang. "Mrs. Reynolds?" The voice was British professional familiar. James, her family's attorney for 30 years. "The board meeting is scheduled for the Metropolitan Gala in 4 weeks. Richard has no idea EV Holdings is requesting a face-to-face." "Good," Kate said. "Let him think it's routine. He's planning to acquire Vanguard Technologies. He needs liquidity approval from the primary investors." "Which means he needs me." "Precisely. Though he doesn't know it's you." Kate looked at the documents spread across the table. 23 years of silence. 23 years of dimming her own light so Richard could shine. He had repaid her by cheating with his secretary and humiliating her in front of the entire country. "James," Kate said quietly, "I want you to prepare 2 things. First, the callable note with the divorce clause. Make sure the language is airtight." "Already done, ma'am." The moment his marital status changed, the clause activated. He owes the estate $210 million payable on demand. Second, the intellectual property records. The original code commits the timestamps, everything that proves I wrote the core algorithm. There was a pause on the line. "Ma'am, are you certain you want to pursue that angle? It will destroy him completely, not just financially. His reputation, his legacy, everything." Kate thought about the courtroom. Richard's laugh. Brittany's giggle. 23 years of being invisible. "He destroyed me first," Kate said. "I'm just returning the favor." She hung up. Outside, the sun was setting over Queens. The light turned the brick wall outside her window a deep orange like fire. Kate Reynolds had spent her entire marriage being underestimated. Now she was going to show the world exactly what a worthless housewife could do. The next morning, Kate woke up at 5. She made coffee in a cheap drip machine and sat at the kitchen table with her laptops open. 3 screens, 3 different streams of information. The first showed the stock price of Harrington Technologies. It was climbing. Richard's divorce victory had actually boosted investor confidence. The headlines called him a decisive leader who had streamlined his personal life. Kate almost laughed. They were praising him for throwing away his wife like yesterday's garbage. The second screen showed a live feed from outside Richard's penthouse. Kate had hired a private investigator months ago. Not to catch him cheating. She had already known about Brittany. No, she needed to track his movements, his meetings, his patterns. The third screen showed the internal communications of EV Holdings. As the sole trustee of the Reynolds Family Trust, Kate controlled every decision. And right now, she was reading the panic in Richard's CFO's emails. The Zurich Consortium is asking questions. They want a meeting. This is unprecedented. Who is the managing partner? Why are they suddenly interested in the acquisition? Richard says he'll handle it. He always says that. Kate took a sip of coffee. Richard had spent 23 years believing he was a self-made man. He had told that story so many times that he believed it himself. But there was no such thing as a self-made man. Every empire had a foundation. And Kate was about to show Richard exactly what happened when the foundation decided to crumble. The phone rang at noon. "Kate." The voice was warm, familiar, worried. "I just saw the news. Are you okay?" Margaret Chen, Maggie, Kate's best friend since college, the only person who knew everything. "I'm fine, Maggie." "You're not fine. You just walked away from a 23-year marriage with nothing. The internet is calling you a gold digger who got what she deserved." Kate smiled. "Let them." "Kate, I'm serious. I know you have a plan. You always have a plan. But this feels different. This feels dangerous." Kate was quiet for a moment. Maggie was the only person she could be honest with. "Do you remember what Richard said to me on our wedding night?" Kate asked. No. He said, "You're the best investment I ever made." I thought it was romantic at the time. He was a businessman. That was how he expressed love. Kate's voice hardened. It took me 15 years to realize he meant it literally. I wasn't his wife. I was an asset. And the moment I stopped appreciating in value, he found a newer model. So this is revenge? No. Kate stood up and walked to the window. Revenge is emotional. This is business. Richard taught me that. He taught me that everything is a transaction. So I'm going to give him exactly what he gave me. Which is nothing. Maggie was silent. I'm going to take back my investment, Kate said. Every dollar, every patent, every piece of intellectual property. And when I'm done, Richard Harrington won't just be broke, he'll be erased, like he never existed at all. Kate, that's terrifying. Good. Kate watched a pigeon land on the brick wall outside. He should have been terrified of me all along. 2 weeks passed. Kate transformed the Queen's apartment into a command center. She worked 18-hour days, just like she had when she was secretly coding the original Harrington AI algorithm in their garage in Boston. Nobody knew about that. Nobody knew that while Richard was out pitching investors and collecting business cards, Kate was the one building the actual product. She had done it for love. She had done it because she believed in Richard's vision. And she had stayed in the shadows because Richard's ego was fragile. He needed to be the genius. He needed to be the hero. So Kate let him take the credit. She let him stand on stages and accept awards for technology she had designed. She let him become a billionaire while she smiled silently beside him. Never again. James called with updates every day. The board meeting at the gala was confirmed. Richard was nervous, but he didn't know why. He had never met the managing partner of EV Holdings. He didn't even know there was a managing partner. He thinks it's going to be some old Swiss banker, James reported. He's planning to charm his way through it. Let him plan, Kate said. I want everything perfect. The dress, the jewelry, the entrance. I want him to feel exactly what I felt in that courtroom. Humiliated? No. Kate looked at herself in the cracked mirror on the wall. Invisible. And then suddenly, devastatingly seen. The night before the gala, Kate allowed herself one moment of weakness. She pulled out her wedding album. She hadn't looked at it in years. There they were, 1995. Richard, with a full head of dark hair, young and hungry, and convinced he was going to change the world. Kate in a simple white dress, looking at him like he was the only man who had ever existed. She had loved him. God help her, she had really loved him. She turned the pages slowly. Their first house. Their first car. The early years when they had nothing but dreams and each other. When had it changed? Kate knew the answer. It had changed the day the company went public. The day Richard became worth $100 million on paper. That was the day he stopped looking at her like a partner. That was the day he started looking at her like furniture. She closed the album. Tomorrow she would walk into that gala and end Richard Harrington's life as he knew it. But tonight, she allowed herself to mourn the man he used to be. The man she had fallen in love with. The man who had died somewhere along the way, replaced by a stranger in an expensive suit. I gave you everything, Kate whispered to the empty room. And you threw it away for a 26-year-old with a fake tan. She put the album back in the box. Tomorrow, Kate Reynolds would rise from the ashes. And Richard Harrington would learn the true cost of underestimating his wife. The morning of the Metropolitan Charity Gala arrived cold and gray. Kate woke up at 4. She hadn't slept more than 3 hours. Her mind kept running through scenarios, possibilities, ways Richard might react when he saw her. She made coffee and sat in the dark, watching the city wake up through her dirty window. Her phone buzzed. James. Everything is in place, ma'am. The dress arrived at the hotel suite. The car will pick you up at 7. Richard has no idea. What's his mood? Nervous. His CFO told him the Zurich investors are sending their managing partner personally. He's been practicing his pitch all week. Kate almost smiled. Richard had always been good at pitches. He could sell ice to polar bears. But tonight there was nothing to sell. Tonight there was only the truth. "One more thing," James said. "Brittany will be there. She's wearing an engagement ring. Richard announced it to his team yesterday." Kate's grip tightened on the phone. "He's engaged already." "The wedding is planned for next month. A destination ceremony in the Maldives. He's already booked the resort." Kate closed her eyes. 3 weeks. He had waited exactly 3 weeks after the divorce to announce his engagement to the woman he had been sleeping with for 2 years. "Thank you, James. I'll see you tonight." She hung up. The anger came then, hot and bright and clean. She had spent 23 years swallowing it. She had spent 23 years being polite, being patient, being the good wife who never raised her voice. Not anymore. Tonight, Richard Harrington was going to meet the woman he should have been afraid of all along. Across the city, Richard was having breakfast in his penthouse. Brittany sat across from him, scrolling through her phone, already dressed in a silk robe that had once belonged to Kate. Richard hadn't bothered to throw it out. Why waste good silk? "Babe, I'm nervous about tonight," Brittany said, not looking up from her screen. "Why? It's just a party." "It's not just a party. It's like the party. Everyone who matters will be there." Richard sipped his coffee. "And you'll be on my arm. The future Mrs. Harrington. They'll love you." Brittany finally looked up. "What about the investor meeting? Your CFO seemed really stressed about it." "David worries too much. The Zurich people have been silent partners for 20 years. They cash the checks and stay out of my way. This meeting is just a formality." "But why now? Why do they suddenly want to meet in person?" Richard shrugged. "Probably some new compliance requirement. Or maybe they want to renegotiate their cut before the Vanguard acquisition. Either way, I'll charm them. That's what I do." Brittany smiled. "You're so confident. That's what I love about you." "Confidence is the only currency that matters, babe. Money comes and goes. But if you believe in yourself, you can always make more." He stood up and walked to the window. The city spread out below him like a kingdom. His kingdom. He thought about Kate for a moment. He wondered where she was. Some cheap apartment somewhere, probably. Crying into her coffee, wondering where it all went wrong. He felt a flicker of something. Not guilt exactly, more like irritation. She had made the divorce so easy. Too easy. He had expected her to fight. He had expected drama. Instead, she had just surrendered. It bothered him. He couldn't explain why. "Babe," Brittany called. "What time is the car coming?" Richard shook off the feeling. 7. Wear the red dress. I want everyone to see what I upgraded to." Brittany giggled and went to get ready. Richard turned back to the window. The sun was breaking through the clouds, casting long shadows across Manhattan. He had everything. The company, the money, the young beautiful fiancée, the respect of everyone who mattered. So why did he feel like he was standing on the edge of a cliff? At 6:30, Kate stood in front of a mirror in a hotel suite near the gala venue. She barely recognized herself. The dress was midnight black velvet, structured and elegant, hugging her figure in a way that commanded attention without begging for it. The diamonds around her neck were the real thing. The Romanov necklace. It had been her mother's. It was worth more than Richard's penthouse. Maggie stood behind her, fussing with the clasp. "You look terrifying," Maggie said. "In the best possible way." "Good. Kate, are you sure about this? Once you walk in there, there's no going back." Kate met her own eyes in the mirror. The woman staring back at her was a stranger. Strong, cold, ready. "I've been going back for 23 years, Maggie. I've been shrinking, apologizing, making myself smaller so Richard could feel bigger." She turned around. "Tonight I stop." Maggie nodded slowly. Then let's go burn it down. The Metropolitan Charity Gala was already in full swing when Richard arrived. The ballroom was packed with New York's elite, politicians, tech moguls, old money, and new. Richard navigated the crowd like a shark through warm water, shaking hands, accepting congratulations on his liberation from his marriage. "Richard, you look fantastic. Freedom suits you." "Thanks, Charles. Life's never been better." Brittany clung to his arm, her red dress drawing stares, some admiring, some not. Richard didn't care. Let them look. Let them judge. He was Richard Harrington. He answered to no one. His CFO, David Bradley, appeared at his elbow. "The investor's representative is here," David said quietly. "They want to meet in the private conference room in 1 hour." "Any idea who it is?" "No. They're keeping it very quiet. But the security team said they arrived in a Rolls-Royce Phantom. This isn't some mid-level banker, Richard. This is someone important." Richard straightened his tie. "Then I'll give them the VIP treatment." "Don't worry so much, David. I've been doing this for 20 years. David didn't look reassured. "Just be careful tonight. Something feels off." Richard clapped him on the shoulder. "You're paranoid. Go get a drink. Relax." David wandered off toward the bar. Richard turned back to the crowd, scanning for useful faces. Then something strange happened. The noise died. Not gradually, suddenly, like someone had pressed mute on the entire room. Richard frowned. The string quartet had stopped playing. The chatter had ceased. Everyone was turning toward the grand staircase. "What's going on?" Brittany asked. Richard looked, and his heart stopped. At the top of the staircase stood a woman in black velvet. She descended slowly, each step, deliberate, controlled. The diamonds at her throat caught the light and threw it back in cold fire. She wasn't looking at the floor. She was looking straight ahead, her eyes sweeping the room like a queen, surveying her subjects. Richard's champagne glass slipped from his fingers. It was Kate. But it wasn't the Kate he knew. The Kate he knew was soft and quiet and invisible. The Kate he knew wore discount dresses and apologized for existing. This woman was something else entirely. This woman looked like she could buy everyone in the room and still have change left over. "Oh my God," Brittany whispered. "Is that your ex-wife?" Richard couldn't answer. His throat had closed. Kate reached the bottom of the stairs. The crowd parted for her. Not because anyone told them to. They simply moved instinctively, making way for someone who obviously belonged in spaces they could only dream of. She didn't walk toward the bar, or the buffet, or the dance floor. She walked straight toward the VIP section. Richard's legs moved before his brain caught up. He intercepted her in the middle of the ballroom. "Kate." His voice came out strangled. "What the hell are you doing here?" She stopped. She looked at his hand, which had grabbed her arm. Then she looked at his face. Her expression was one of mild distaste, like she had stepped in something unpleasant. "Remove your hand, Richard." "Did you crash this party? Who let you in? I swear to God, if you're here to make a scene." "I'm not here for you." Her voice was calm, low, devastating. "I have a business meeting." "Business?" Brittany laughed nervously. "What business? You don't have a job." Kate turned her gaze to Brittany. She didn't say anything. She just looked, up and down. A complete assessment in 3 seconds. "The dress is lovely," Kate said finally. "Though red is a bold choice for a second wife. It draws attention to the circumstances." Brittany's face went white, then red. "Richard, are you going to let her talk to me like that?" But Richard wasn't listening. His brain was still trying to process what he was seeing. The dress, the diamonds, the confidence. "Where did you get that necklace?" he asked slowly. Kate smiled. It was not a warm smile. "It's been in my family for 4 generations. But you wouldn't know about that, would you? You never asked where I came from. You only cared about where you were going." What are you talking about? Richard. A new voice. Charles Wellington, the gala organizer, was approaching. His face was practically glowing. I see you've reconnected with our guest of honor. Richard blinked. Guest of honor? Charles ignored him. He was focused entirely on Kate. Ms. Reynolds, we are thrilled you chose our event for your return to society. Your table is ready whenever you'd like to sit. And may I say the donations your family has made to this charity over the years. Wait. Richard held up his hand. Reynolds. Her name is Harrington. Was Harrington. Whatever. Charles looked at Richard with something like pity. Richard, don't you know who you were married to? This is Kate Reynolds, as in the Reynolds steel fortune, as in one of the oldest industrial families in America. The words hit Richard like physical blows. Reynolds steel. The Reynolds family was legendary. Old money. Real money. The kind of money that didn't appear on Forbes lists because they didn't need the validation. That's impossible, Richard said. His voice was shaking now. She was nobody. She was a graphic designer when I met her. She clipped coupons. Kate stepped closer. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I was a woman who wanted to be loved for who she was, not what she owned. I wanted to build something real with you. So I hid. I let you believe you were the provider. I let you believe you were the genius. She paused. I dimmed my light so you could shine. Richard's face had gone gray. But the play is over now. Kate continued. You wanted a divorce. You got one. You wanted my name removed from yours. Done. She leaned in close enough that he could smell her perfume. But you forgot to ask one question, Richard. You never asked where the money for your company came from. What? I am EV Holdings. Kate's voice was ice. I funded your company. Every dollar of that initial investment came from my family's trust, and I own 60% of your debt. Richard couldn't speak. He couldn't move. We have a board meeting in 30 minutes, Kate said. I suggest you attend. It's going to be the most important meeting of your life. She walked past him toward the private conference rooms. Richard stood frozen in the middle of the ballroom. The crowd was staring. The whispers were spreading like wildfire. Brittany tugged at his arm. Richard, what's happening? What did she mean? He didn't answer. He couldn't answer, because he was starting to understand that everything he thought he knew about his life was a lie. The conference room was cold. Richard sat at one end of the long table. His hands were trembling. David sat beside him, looking like he might vomit. At the other end sat Kate. She had 3 lawyers flanking her. James stood behind her chair like a silver-haired sentinel. Let me explain the situation clearly, Kate said, opening a leather folder. You need capital to acquire Vanguard Technologies. That capital is locked in a credit line controlled by EV Holdings, which I control. Kate, listen, Richard started. Ms. Reynolds, Kate corrected. We're in a business meeting, Mr. Harrington. Let's keep it professional. Richard swallowed. Fine. Ms. Reynolds, whatever happened between us personally, this is business. The Vanguard deal will triple the stock price. Everyone makes money. There's no reason to let emotions. I agree completely. Kate slid a document across the table. Which is why I'm approaching this purely as a business decision. David, please read paragraph 4, subsection B. David picked up the paper with shaking hands. The primary investment from EV Holdings is classified as a high-risk callable note. The lender reserves the right to recall the full principal plus interest immediately upon the occurrence of a qualifying event. He stopped, his face drained of color. Keep reading, Kate said. A qualifying event includes a change in the CEO's marital status. Silence. Richard stared at the paper like it was a snake about to bite him. You put a divorce clause in the investment contract. My father's lawyers did 23 years ago, Standard protection for family assets. If the marriage fails, the investment returns home. How much? Richard's voice was barely audible. The original loan was $15 million. With compound interest over 23 years, you owe approximately $210 million. I don't have $210 million in cash. Every cent is tied up in stock and the new R&D facility. If you call this loan, you'll bankrupt the company. Kate nodded slowly. Yes. You'd burn your own investment just to hurt me. Richard. Kate leaned forward. I have a net worth of $4 billion. Losing $100 million is a rounding error. For you, it's everything. And frankly, watching you lose everything is worth every penny. Richard stood up so fast his chair fell backward. This is insane. You're insane. 23 years, Kate. 23 years I built that company. I put in the work. I made the deals. You gave the speeches, Kate said quietly. You shook the hands. You took the credit. She stood up too, matching his height. But who wrote the code, Richard? He froze. Who stayed up until 3 in the morning debugging the algorithm while you slept? Who built the core architecture that made everything else possible? Who created the actual product that you've been selling for 2 decades? Richard's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Kate nodded to James. James stepped forward and placed a second document on the table. During your marriage, James said, Ms. Reynolds worked extensively on the foundational code for the Harrington AI. We have timestamp server logs and original commits from her personal laptop proving that 80% of the core algorithm was her work. She helped, Richard said weakly, but it was my vision, my idea. Ideas aren't copyrightable, James replied. Code is. And since Ms. Reynolds was never an employee and signed no intellectual property assignment agreement, she owns the copyright to the core technology. Richard sat back down, heavily, like a puppet with cut strings. Kate gathered her papers. You have 24 hours to wire $210 million to the EV Holdings account. If you fail to do so, I will file for immediate liquidation of Harrington Technologies to recover assets. Additionally, I'm issuing a cease and desist on the use of my code. Without it, your company is an empty shell. Kate, please. She stopped at the door. You laughed at me in that courtroom, Richard. You told me I had nothing. You told me to apply at Starbucks. She turned to face him one last time. I hope you saved the number. You're going to need it. She walked out. Richard sat alone in the cold conference room. For the first time in his adult life, he had no idea what to do. Outside, Kate walked toward the elevator. Her heart was pounding. Her hands were shaking, but her face showed nothing. She passed a bench near the coat check. Brittany was sitting there, alone. Her mascara was running. Is he okay? Brittany asked. Kate stopped. She looked at the young woman who had helped destroy her marriage. She should have felt hatred. She should have felt satisfaction. Instead, she felt tired. He's broke, Brittany, Kate said simply. Actually, he's about $50 million in debt. If I were you, I'd return that ring before the collectors come for it. Brittany burst into tears. Kate walked into the elevator. The doors closed. She leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. It was done. After 23 years, it was finally done. Her phone buzzed. James. The legal documents are filed. Richard has until 5 p.m. tomorrow. What would you like to do now, ma'am? Kate opened her eyes. Now, she said quietly. We wait for him to panic, and then we watch him destroy himself. The elevator descended into the darkness. Above her in the conference room, Richard Harrington was just beginning to understand the magnitude of his mistake. He had underestimated the quiet woman who stood beside him for 23 years. And now he was going to pay for every single moment of it. Richard didn't sleep that night. He paced his penthouse until 3 in the morning, then collapsed on the couch with a bottle of scotch. His mind kept replaying the conference room. Kate's face, her voice, the cold certainty in her eyes. $210 million. He didn't have it. Not in cash. Not anywhere close. His phone had been ringing for hours. Board members, investors, reporters who had somehow already caught wind of the disaster. He ignored them all. Brittany had locked herself in the bedroom. She hadn't spoken to him since they left the gala. At 5 a.m, Richard called his lawyer. "Sarah, I need you." "Richard, it's 5 a.m. I know what time it is. I need you to find something. Anything." Kate committed fraud. She lied about her identity for 23 years. There has to be a way to void the contract. Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Richard, I've been reviewing the documents all night. Omission isn't fraud in this context. She used her legal name. She never claimed to be poor. You simply never asked about her background." "Then attack the callable note. Find a loophole." "There is no loophole. The clause was drafted by Reynolds family attorneys. These people have been protecting generational wealth for over a century. The language is bulletproof." Richard threw his glass against the wall. It shattered, spraying scotch across the marble floor. "Then what am I supposed to do? Just let her take everything?" "You could try to negotiate, offer her something she wants." "She doesn't want anything. She wants to destroy me." "Then you need to ask yourself why." Sarah's voice was calm, measured, the voice of a lawyer who had seen too many divorces turn ugly. "What did you do to her, Richard? Because this level of planning, this level of patience, this isn't a woman acting on impulse. This is a woman who has been preparing for years." Richard hung up. He walked to the window and stared out at the city. His city. The city he had conquered through sheer force of will, or so he had believed. Now he understood that everything he had built was standing on borrowed ground, ground that belonged to Kate Reynolds. His phone buzzed. A text from David. "The Wall Street Journal is asking for comment. They're running a story about EV Holdings taking control of the company." "What should I say?" Richard typed back. "Say nothing. I'm handling it." But he wasn't handling it. He had no idea how to handle it. And then, somewhere in the fog of panic and alcohol, an idea began to form. Kate wanted to fight in the boardroom. She wanted to destroy him through legal channels and financial pressure. But there was another battlefield, a place where Richard had always excelled: public opinion. He picked up his phone and called his PR team. "Get everyone to the office. I don't care what time it is. We're going on offense." By 10 a.m, Richard had transformed himself. Gone was the disheveled, desperate man from the night before. In his place stood the Richard Harrington the world knew, the visionary, the fighter, the underdog who had built an empire from nothing. He stood outside the headquarters of Harrington Technologies. Cameras from every major news outlet were pointed at him. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard began, his voice shaking with carefully manufactured emotion. "I built this company from a garage. I poured my blood, my sweat, my entire life into Harrington Technologies. But today it's under attack." He paused, letting the drama build. "Not by competitors, not by market forces, but by a woman I trusted, a woman I loved. My ex-wife has revealed herself to be something I never imagined: a corporate saboteur, a fraud." The reporters leaned in. "For 23 years, Kate Harrington hid her true identity from me. She pretended to be a simple woman while secretly controlling the very investors who funded my dream. Now, out of spite, because our marriage ended, she is using her family's unlimited resources to stage a hostile takeover of my life's work." He wiped a fake tear from his eye. "She doesn't care about the employees. She doesn't care about the technology that's changing the world. She only cares about revenge. I'm asking the American public to stand with me. Don't let old money crush innovation. Don't let a bitter ex-wife destroy what we've built together." The cameras flashed. The reporters shouted questions. Richard raised his hand for silence. I'm not going to let her win. I'm going to fight for every single employee, every single shareholder, every single person who believed in this company. Because that's what leaders do. We fight. He walked back inside, flanked by his PR team. That was perfect, his publicist said. The sympathy angle is already trending. Save Harrington is the #1 hashtag on Twitter. Richard allowed himself a small smile. Kate had money. Kate had lawyers. But Richard had the crowd. And in America, the crowd could move mountains. Kate watched the press conference from her apartment in Queens. Maggie sat beside her, horrified. He's lying. He's flat out lying to the entire country. Of course he is. Kate's voice was calm. That's what Richard does. He sells. He's been selling himself his entire life. But people are believing him. Look at the comments. They're calling you a gold digger, a manipulator. They're saying you trapped him. Kate turned off the television. Let them. Kate, this is serious. He's controlling the narrative. If he gets enough public pressure, the board might side with him just to avoid the PR nightmare. The board doesn't matter anymore. I own their debt. The shareholders don't matter. I can liquidate the company tomorrow if I choose. Then why haven't you? Kate was quiet for a moment. Because I don't just want to beat him, Maggie. I want him to be exposed. I want the world to see exactly who Richard Harrington really is. And for that, I need him to keep talking. Her phone buzzed. James. Ma'am, I have something you need to see. What is it? During our due diligence, we found something in the company's internal servers. Recordings. Richard has been secretly taping board meetings and private conversations for years, apparently as insurance against potential betrayals. Kate sat up straight. And one of those recordings is from 3 years ago. A conversation between Richard and his CFO about the IPO. Ma'am, he admits to planning to cash out and abandon the company. He admits that he never believed in the long-term viability of the technology. And he specifically mentions using you as a workhorse who would be replaced the moment the company went public. Kate's breath caught. Send it to me. Already done. The question is, what do you want to do with it? Kate looked at the television. Richard's face was frozen on the screen, mid-speech, looking every inch the wronged hero. He wants a public war, Kate said slowly. Then let's give him one. Richard was in his office when the screens changed. He was celebrating. The press conference had gone better than expected. The narrative was shifting. People were starting to see Kate as the villain. Then every screen in the building flickered. The Harrington Technologies logo disappeared. In its place was a video. Richard's blood ran cold. It was him. 3 years ago, sitting with his feet up on a conference table holding a glass of scotch. Screw the investors, video Richard said laughing. And screw the code. Once we IPO, I'm cashing out half my shares. I don't care if the tech actually works long term. I just need it to look good for the launch. Richard lunged for the controls. Nothing worked. The video was playing on every screen in the building, and somehow he knew on every screen across the internet. What about Kate? David's voice asked in the recording. She's working 18-hour days on the patch. Video Richard sneered. Kate is a workhorse. She likes the grind. Let her type away. I'm the face. Nobody cares about the person who writes the code. They only care about the person who sells it. I'll replace her the second we go public. The video ended. Silence. Richard looked around his office. His employees were staring at him through the glass walls. Their faces showed shock, betrayal, disgust. His phone exploded with notifications. Save Harrington was no longer trending. Jail for Harrington had taken its place. Richard grabbed his phone and called his PR team. Fix this. Now. Richard, it's everywhere. CNN, Fox, the New York Times. The video is authentic. Our tech team confirmed it. We can't spin this. Then delete it. Take it down. It's on 1,000 different servers. Every time we remove one copy, 10 more appear. Someone knew exactly how to make this go viral. Richard's hands were shaking. Kate. Kate had done this. She hadn't just been waiting for him to make a mistake. She had been waiting for him to dig his own grave. And he had done it beautifully. The FBI arrived at noon. Richard was in his office trying to draft a statement when two agents walked through the door. Richard Harrington. Who's asking? The lead agent held up a badge. Special Agent Morrison, FBI Financial Crimes Division. We have a warrant for your arrest. Arrest for what? Securities fraud, embezzlement, wire fraud. The agent pulled out handcuffs. The video you leaked this morning prompted an expedited review of your company's financial records. We found several irregularities. What irregularities? You've been charging personal expenses as corporate R&D, your fiancé's apartment, your trips to Saint-Tropez, a $200,000 engagement ring. The agent stepped forward. Turn around and place your hands behind your back. This is insane. Those were legitimate business expenses. My lawyer approved every single one. Your lawyer is being interviewed at the field office as we speak. She seems very eager to cooperate. Richard's legs went weak. Sarah was cooperating. His own lawyer was turning on him. The handcuffs clicked around his wrists. You have the right to remain silent, the agent began. Richard wasn't listening. He was looking out the window. Across the street, a black Rolls-Royce was parked at the curb. The back window rolled down, just an inch. He saw dark sunglasses, a flash of red lipstick. Kate was watching. The window rolled back up. The car drove away. Richard was shoved into the back of an unmarked sedan. The door slammed. The car pulled away from the building. Through the tinted windows he could see his employees gathered at the entrance. Some were crying. Some were cheering. The King of New York was being hauled away in handcuffs. And somewhere in that city, Kate Reynolds was having the best day of her life. The news broke within minutes. Harrington CEO arrested on fraud charges. Tech tycoon's empire crumbles from billionaire to prisoner. The fall of Richard Harrington. Kate watched from her apartment. Maggie had brought champagne, but Kate hadn't touched it. You did it, Maggie said. You actually did it. He's finished. Not yet. Kate, he's been arrested. The company is collapsing. The stock is down 80%. What more do you want? Kate turned off the television. I want his legacy. I want to erase him completely. I want the world to forget Richard Harrington ever existed. Maggie stared at her. That's not justice, Kate. That's annihilation. Is there a difference? Kate's phone buzzed. James. The bankruptcy proceedings have been accelerated. The company's assets will be auctioned next month. Everything. The patents, the trademarks, the source code. Good. Make sure I'm on the buyer's list. Ma'am, you're the primary creditor. You'll have first right of refusal on every item. Kate smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. Then I'm going shopping. That night, Kate allowed herself one moment of weakness. She sat alone in her cramped apartment holding a photograph. It was their wedding day, 23 years ago. Richard young and handsome and full of dreams. Kate young and hopeful, and so desperately in love. She had believed in him. She had believed they would build something beautiful together. When had it all gone wrong? She knew the answer. It had gone wrong the moment Richard started believing his own myth. The moment he convinced himself that he was a self-made man. The moment he forgot that the woman beside him was the foundation everything else was built on. Her phone rang. Mom? A familiar voice, tired, broken. It's Richard. Kate's heart skipped. How did you get this number? I still have contacts. I'm calling from the detention center. They're letting me make one call. And you called me. I had to. His voice cracked. Kate, I'm sorry. I know that doesn't mean anything now. I know I destroyed us. But I need you to understand. I never meant for it to end like this. Kate was silent. I loved you, Richard continued. In the beginning, I really loved you. You were the smartest person I'd ever met, the kindest, the most patient. And somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing you. I stopped appreciating you. I got so caught up in being Richard Harrington that I forgot to be your husband. Why are you telling me this? Because tomorrow I'm going to prison, and I might never get another chance. He took a shaky breath. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I'm just asking you to remember that once a long time ago we were happy. We were good together. Before I ruined everything. Kate closed her eyes. The memories came flooding back. Their first apartment so small they could touch both walls at the same time. The late nights eating pizza while Richard practiced his pitches. The moment he got his first investment check and lifted her off the ground, spinning her around, shouting that they were going to change the world. They had been happy once, before the money, before the fame, before Richard became someone she didn't recognize. Richard, Kate said quietly. Yes. I do remember. I remember everything, the good and the bad. She paused. But memory isn't enough. You taught me that. You taught me that the past doesn't matter. Only the present. Only the deal in front of you. Kate. Goodbye, Richard. She hung up. She sat in the darkness for a long time. The photograph was still in her hand. Then she stood up, walked to the kitchen, and dropped it in the trash. The past was dead. It was time to bury it. The next morning, Kate woke up early. She had a meeting with James to finalize the auction strategy. She had calls with her legal team about the intellectual property claims. She had 1,000 details to manage. But first, she made coffee and sat by the window. The sun was rising over Queens. Golden light spilled across the brick buildings, turning the ugly into something almost beautiful. Kate Reynolds had spent 23 years being invisible. Now the whole world knew her name. But the war wasn't over yet. Richard was in custody, but his legacy remained. The company still bore his name. The technology still carried his brand. The myth of the self-made billionaire was still alive in the minds of millions. Kate was going to change that. She was going to buy his company. She was going to strip his name from every product, every building, every document. She was going to release the code she had written to the world for free, making it impossible for anyone to profit from Richard's stolen glory. And when she was done, Richard Harrington wouldn't be a villain in the history books. He wouldn't be anything at all. Her phone buzzed. Maggie. The auction date is set, 1 month from today. Are you ready? Kate looked out at the city. I've been ready for 23 years. She put down her coffee and got to work. The final act was about to begin. 1 month passed like a held breath. Richard Harrington sat in a federal detention center awaiting trial. His lawyers had tried 3 times to get him bail. 3 times the judge had refused. Flight risk, they said. Assets being liquidated, they said. No ties to the community. No ties. 23 years of marriage. 20 years of building a company. And now the court said he had no ties. Kate had visited him once. She hadn't planned to. She had told herself it was over. But something pulled her to that gray building on a Tuesday afternoon. Richard looked smaller. The orange jumpsuit hung loose on his frame. He had lost more weight. His eyes were hollow. "You came," he said through the glass partition. "I don't know why." "Neither do I." He tried to smile. It looked like a wound. "The auction is tomorrow. I saw it on the news." Kate said nothing. "They're selling everything, Kate. My desk, my chair, the espresso machine I bought for the break room." His voice cracked. "They're selling my company for parts, like a junked car." "It was never your company, Richard. It was ours, and you forgot that." "I know." He pressed his hand against the glass. I know I forgot. I know I took you for granted. I know I was a terrible husband. Tears ran down his face. But did I deserve this? Did I deserve to lose everything? Kate looked at his hand on the glass. 23 years ago, that hand had held hers at the altar. That hand had touched her face when he promised to love her forever. You didn't lose everything, Richard, Kate said quietly. You threw it away. There's a difference. She stood up and walked out. She didn't look back. The auction was held in a converted warehouse in Midtown. Security was tight. Only pre-approved bidders were allowed inside. The press had been banned, though Kate knew they were camped outside waiting for any scrap of information. Kate arrived early. She wore a simple black dress. No diamonds this time. No statement. Today wasn't about making an entrance. Today was about finishing what she had started. James met her at the door. Everything is ready, ma'am. You're registered as bidder 7. Who else is here? Several private equity firms. 2 tech conglomerates looking for patents. A few vulture capitalists hoping to flip the assets. He paused. And one surprise? What surprise? Brittany Cole registered as a bidder this morning. Kate stopped walking. Brittany? She's backed by her father. Apparently he's a real estate developer in Florida, worth about $50 million. She's trying to save Richard's legacy. It appears so. She's been telling the press she believes in his innocence, that she's going to rebuild the company and clear his name. Kate almost laughed. Almost. Let her try. See. The auction began at 10 sharp. Kate sat in the back row. She kept her paddle in her lap, her face neutral. The auctioneer was a thin man with a mechanical voice. He moved through the items with the efficiency of a machine. Lot 201. Office furniture from the executive suite. Starting bid $500. Kate didn't move. Lot 202. Original artwork from the main lobby. Starting bid $2,000. Still nothing. She watched the vultures circle. They bid aggressively on the physical assets. The furniture, the artwork, the cars. They wanted trophies. Proof that they had picked the bones of a fallen giant. Let them have their trophies. Kate was waiting for something else. 3 hours into the auction, the auctioneer paused. We now move to Lot 450, the intellectual property portfolio of Harrington Technologies. This includes all registered patents, the trademarked branding, and the source code for the Harrington AI predictive algorithm. The room shifted. People sat up straighter. This was the real prize. Due to ongoing litigation regarding the copyright, the auctioneer continued. The starting bid is set at $1 million. Do I hear $1 million? Silence. Kate frowned. $1 million. For technology, worth billions. A hand went up in the front row. 500,000. A man called out. The auctioneer looked pained. I have 500,000. Do I hear 600? More silence. Kate understood now. The copyright lawsuit she had filed was toxic. No corporation wanted to buy the code only to face years of litigation with the Reynolds family legal team. 300,000, another voice called. 200,000. The bids were dropping. They were treating her code like radioactive waste. Then Brittany Cole raised her paddle. $100,000. Kate turned to look at her. The young woman was sitting ramrod straight, her jaw set. She was wearing too much makeup. Her dress was too tight. But there was determination in her eyes. She really believed she could save Richard. I have 100,000, the auctioneer said. Do I hear 110? 50,000? Someone shouted, laughing. The room rippled with cruel amusement. They were mocking her now. Mocking Richard. Mocking everything he had built. Brittany's face went red. She raised her paddle again. 100,000. She repeated, her voice shaking. The bid is at 100,000. Going once. Kate watched Brittany. The girl was trembling. She was out of her depth. She was about to spend her father's money on technology she couldn't use because Kate owned the copyright. It would ruin her. Going twice. Kate raised her paddle. $1. The room went silent. Every head turned toward the back row. Kate stood up slowly. I am Kate Reynolds, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the warehouse. I am the primary lien holder on this company's debt. I am also the verified author of 80% of the code in this lot. She walked down the center aisle. The crowd parted. If anyone in this room bids on this item, Kate continued, my legal team will serve you with a copyright infringement lawsuit before you reach your car. The litigation will take years, it will cost millions, and you will lose. She stopped at the front row directly in front of Brittany. So I'll ask once, does anyone want to bid $2? Silence. The man who had bid $50,000 lowered his paddle and placed it on the floor. The private equity partners looked at their shoes. Brittany stared at Kate with wide, frightened eyes. You can't do this, Brittany whispered. This is Richard's life work. No, Kate said quietly. This is my life work. Richard just put his name on it. She turned to the auctioneer. I believe I have the winning bid. The auctioneer's hand was shaking as he lifted his gavel. I have $1 from bidder 7. Going once, going twice. The gavel came down. Sold to Ms. Reynolds for $1. Kate walked to the podium. She signed the transfer documents. She accepted the small black hard drive containing the master keys to everything Richard had ever claimed to build. Then she turned and walked out. Behind her, Brittany Cole burst into tears. Outside, the press was waiting. Ms. Reynolds, how does it feel to own your ex-husband's company? Are you going to rebrand? Will it become Reynolds Technologies? What's your message to Richard Harrington? Kate stopped at the edge of the crowd. I have a brief statement, she said. The cameras pushed closer. Microphones were thrust toward her face. 23 years ago, I helped build something I believed would change the world. I wrote the code. I designed the architecture. I worked 18-hour days because I believed in the vision. She paused. But I let someone else take the credit. I stayed silent because I thought that's what good wives did. I thought my contribution didn't matter as long as the work got done. She held up the hard drive. This is the core algorithm of what used to be called Harrington AI. As of this moment, it will no longer bear that name. And as of tonight, it will belong to everyone. The reporters murmured in confusion. I'm releasing the source code, Kate said. Open source. Free to use, modify, and distribute. Every university, every hospital, every startup in the world will have access to this technology at no cost. But that's worth billions, a reporter shouted. Why would you give it away? Kate smiled. It was a sad smile, a tired smile. Because the value of something isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in impact. I wrote this code to help people, to optimize hospital triages, to improve disaster relief, to make the world a little bit better. Her voice hardened. Richard turned it into a profit machine. He forgot what it was for. I'm going to remind him. She walked to her waiting car. Ms. Reynolds, one more question. What happens to Richard now? Kate opened the car door. He gets what he always wanted, she said, to be forgotten. She got in. The door closed. The car drove away. The news broke within the hour. Reynolds heiress releases billion-dollar code for free Harrington legacy, erased as ex-wife gives technology to the world, the ultimate revenge. She didn't keep the code. She set it free. In his cell, Richard Harrington watched the coverage on a small television. He saw Kate on the screen. He saw her holding up the hard drive. He heard her words. It will belong to everyone. He understood now. This was worse than bankruptcy. This was worse than prison. This was annihilation. Kate hadn't just taken his company. She had dissolved it into nothing. She had made his life's work common property. In 5 years, no one would remember Harrington Technologies. No one would remember the stock price or the magazine covers. and no one would remember him. He sank down onto his cot and stared at the ceiling. He had thought Kate was weak. He had thought her silence was submission. He had been so wrong. That evening, Kate sat in her apartment in Queens. Maggie had brought champagne again. This time, Kate drank it. "You did it," Maggie said. "You actually erased him from history." "I erased his name from the code," Kate corrected. "The technology will live on. It will help people. It will do what I always wanted it to do. But without any credit. Without any recognition." Kate shrugged. "I don't need recognition, Maggie. I never did. I just needed to know it mattered." Maggie looked at her friend. There was something different in Kate's face. Something lighter, like a weight had been lifted. "What are you going to do now?" Maggie asked. Kate thought about it. "I'm going to Florence," she said. "I'm going to sit in a cafe and drink espresso and watch the sunset over the Arno. I'm going to read books and eat too much pasta and remember who I was before I became Richard Harrington's wife. And then I'm going to start something new. Something of my own. Not hiding. Not in the shadows." Kate smiled. "Something with my name on it." Maggie raised her glass. "To new beginnings." Kate clinked her glass against Maggie's. "To new beginnings." The next morning, Kate's phone rang. It was a number she didn't recognize. She almost didn't answer. "Hello." "Ms. Reynolds." A woman's voice. Young, nervous. "This is Brittany Cole." Kate set down her coffee. "How did you get this number?" "I found it. I needed to talk to you." "We have nothing to talk about." "Please." Brittany's voice cracked. "I know you hate me. I know I helped destroy your marriage. But I need you to understand something." Kate was quiet. "I didn't know," Brittany continued. "When Richard and I started, I didn't know he was married. He told me you were separated. He told me you had agreed to an open marriage. He said you didn't love him anymore. And you believed him. I was 24. He was powerful and charming, and he paid attention to me. Do you know how rare that is, to have someone like Richard Harrington look at you like you're the only person in the room?" Kate knew. She remembered. "By the time I found out the truth, I was already in too deep. I told myself it didn't matter. I told myself you must have done something wrong, or he wouldn't have strayed. I convinced myself I was special." Brittany laughed bitterly. "I wasn't special. I was just young. And now I'm 27 with no job, no reputation, and my father won't speak to me because I lost his money at the auction." "What do you want from me, Brittany?" "I want to apologize. I know it doesn't change anything. I know you'll never forgive me. But I need you to know that I'm sorry. I was stupid and selfish, and I hurt someone who didn't deserve it." Kate closed her eyes. She thought about the young woman she had been at 24. Hopeful. Naive. So sure that love would conquer all. Richard had broken both of them in different ways. "Brittany," Kate said finally. "Yes. I don't forgive you. I don't know if I ever will. But I understand. Richard was very good at making people believe what he wanted them to believe. I believed him for 23 years. Brittany was crying now. "What am I supposed to do?" she whispered. "How am I supposed to move on from this?" Kate thought about it. "You start over," she said. "You figure out who you are without him. You build something of your own. And you never ever let a man define your worth again." "Is that what you're doing?" "That's exactly what I'm doing." Silence on the line. "Thank you," Brittany said finally. "For not hanging up. For listening. Goodbye, Brittany." Kate hung up. She stood at the window for a long time watching the city wake up. Then she picked up her phone and called James. "Book me a flight to Florence, one way." "When, ma'am?" "Tonight." At 7 that evening, a black car pulled up outside Kate's apartment building. She had packed light, one suitcase, a few books, her mother's jewelry, Everything else could be replaced. Maggie was there to see her off. "You're really doing this," Maggie said. "Just walking away from everything." "I'm not walking away. I'm walking toward." Kate hugged her friend. "Come visit me in Italy. We'll drink wine and eat cheese and pretend we're 20 again." "I'll hold you to that." Kate got in the car. As it pulled away from the curb, she looked back at the building one last time. The cramped apartment, the peeling paint, the radiator that clanked like a dying engine. She had been happy there in a strange way. It had been the first place that was truly hers. Not Richard's, not the Reynolds family's, just hers. But it was time to move on. The car merged onto the highway, heading toward JFK. Kate leaned back in the seat and closed her eyes. Tomorrow, she would wake up in Florence. She would drink espresso in a cafe overlooking the Arno. She would feel the sun on her face and remember what it was like to be alive. And Richard Harrington would wake up in a cell alone, forgotten, with nothing but the memory of what he had thrown away. It wasn't justice. It was something better. It was freedom. 6 months had passed since Kate boarded that plane to Florence. The world had moved on. News cycles churned through new scandals, new disasters, new billionaires rising and falling. Richard Harrington's name appeared less and less frequently. First, he was front-page news, then a sidebar, then nothing at all. Exactly as Kate had planned. She spent her days wandering cobblestone streets, learning Italian from an elderly woman who lived downstairs and writing. Not code this time. Words. A memoir that no publisher would ever see. A record of 23 years of silence, written for no one but herself. She was happy, or something close to it. Then James called. "Ma'am, there's been a development." Kate was sitting at a cafe, watching tourists photograph the Ponte Vecchio. She set down her espresso. "What kind of development?" "Richard's trial concluded yesterday. The verdict came in this morning." Kate's heart stuttered. She hadn't followed the trial. She had told herself she didn't care about the outcome. She had been lying. "And guilty on all counts: securities fraud, embezzlement, wire fraud. The judge is scheduling sentencing for next week. The prosecution is recommending 15 years. Kate closed her eyes. 15 years. Richard would be 70 when he got out. If he got out. "There's more," James said carefully. "Richard has requested to see you, before the sentencing." "No. He says he has something to give you. Something he says will explain everything." "I don't want his explanations. I told him you'd refuse. He said to tell you it's about your mother." Kate's blood went cold. "What about my mother?" He wouldn't say, only that you need to hear it in person. Kate stared at the bridge. Tourists laughed and posed for photos. Life went on around her like a river flowing past a stone. Her mother had died 12 years ago. Cancer. Kate had been at her bedside when she passed. Richard had been at a conference in Tokyo. He had sent flowers. What could Richard possibly know about her mother? "Book me a flight," Kate heard herself say. "I'll be there tomorrow." The Federal Detention Center looked exactly the same. Gray walls, gray floors, gray faces. Kate walked through the security checkpoint, surrendered her phone, and followed a guard to the visitor's room. Richard was already waiting. He looked worse than before. Thinner, older. His hair had gone completely gray. The orange jumpsuit hung on him like a shroud. Kate sat down across from him. The glass partition between them felt like a canyon. "You came," Richard said. "You mentioned my mother. Start talking." Richard nodded slowly. He seemed to be gathering himself, preparing for something difficult. "I never told you how I really met your father." Kate frowned. "You met him at the investment meeting, in Zurich, when you were raising capital." "That's the story I told you. That's the story I told everyone." Richard's voice was barely above a whisper. "It wasn't true." "Then what is the truth?" Richard took a deep breath. "I met your father 6 months before that meeting. At a hospital in Boston. Your mother was there. She was already sick, Kate. The first diagnosis. Kate's world tilted. That's impossible. She wasn't diagnosed until I was 35. I remember the day she told me. She hid it. For years. She didn't want you to know. Richard's eyes were wet. She made me promise never to tell you. She said you'd give up everything to take care of her. She said you'd sacrifice your whole life. I don't understand. Why were you at the hospital? I was working there. Freelance IT work. I was nobody, Kate. I was installing computers and debugging networks for $8 an hour. Richard laughed bitterly. I wasn't a rising entrepreneur. I was a janitor with a college degree and a mountain of debt. Kate couldn't speak. I met your mother in the oncology waiting room. She was alone. Your father was at work. You were at graduate school. She was scared and lonely, and I was there. Richard's voice cracked. We talked for hours. She told me about you. Her brilliant daughter who was wasting her talent in a dead-end job. She showed me your picture. Richard. I fell in love with that picture, Kate, before I ever met you. Your mother saw it. She saw everything. Richard pressed his hand against the glass. She came to me a week later with a proposition. She would give me the money to start a company. She would introduce me to you. And in exchange, I would take care of you. I would give you a life where you could use your gifts. Kate felt tears streaming down her face. She paid you to marry me. She paid me to love you. She said I had potential. She said she could see I was smart, just unlucky. She believed in me before anyone else did. Richard's voice broke completely. And I did love you, Kate. That part was real. I loved you from the moment we met at that coffee shop. She arranged it, but the love was real. Then why? Kate's voice was a ragged whisper. Why did you destroy us? Why did you throw it all away? Richard was silent for a long moment. Because I was ashamed, he finally said. Every time I looked at you, I was reminded that I wasn't self-made. I was reminded that your mother had bought me like a piece of furniture. The more successful I became, the more I hated myself for how it started. So you punished me for your shame. I punished both of us. Richard slumped back in his chair. Brittany was an escape. She didn't know who I really was. She didn't know I was a fraud. With her, I could pretend to be the man the magazine said I was. Kate wiped her eyes. You should have told me. I know. 23 years, Richard. 23 years of lies. I know. They sat in silence. The weight of 2 decades pressed down on them both. Finally, Kate spoke. What did you want to give me? Richard reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. He slid it through the small slot in the partition. Kate opened it. Inside was a photograph, old faded. Her mother, young and beautiful, standing next to a hospital bed. And in the bed, hooked up to monitors, was a young man Kate barely recognized. Richard. 25 years ago. Thin, sick, terrified. I had cancer too, Richard said quietly. Stage 2 lymphoma. That's why I was at the hospital in the first place. Your mother found out. She paid for my treatment. She saved my life. Kate stared at the photograph. She never told me any of this. She made me swear. She said you'd never accept help from her. She said you were too proud, too independent. So she found another way. Richard's voice was barely audible. She loved you more than anything in this world, Kate. Everything she did for you. Kate pressed the photograph to her chest. Her mother. Her fierce, stubborn, secretive mother. Manipulating from beyond the grave. Trying to give Kate the life she thought Kate deserved. It was wrong. It was presumptuous. It was a violation of everything Kate believed about autonomy and choice. And it was love. Pure, desperate, all-consuming love. I'm being sentenced next week, Richard said. Probably 15 years. I'll be old when I get out. If I get out. Kate looked at him. I'm not going to ask for forgiveness, Richard continued. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know the truth, all of it, before it was too late. Kate stood up. Richard. Yes. Thank you, for finally being honest. She turned to leave. Kate. She stopped at the door. I hope you find someone who deserves you, Richard said. Someone who loves you for you, not because they were paid, not because they were scared, just because you're you. Kate didn't turn around. Goodbye, Richard. She walked out of the detention center and didn't look back. The flight back to Florence felt longer than before. Kate sat in first class staring out the window at the clouds below. The photograph was in her purse. She hadn't been able to stop looking at it. Her mother, Richard, a secret 25 years old. Everything she thought she knew about her life was built on lies. But were they lies? Or were they just truths she hadn't been ready to hear? Her phone buzzed. Maggie. I heard you went back to see him. Are you okay? I don't know, Kate said honestly. I found out some things. About my mother. About how Richard and I really met. Do you want to talk about it? Not yet. I need to process. Okay. But Kate, whatever you found out, it doesn't change who you are. You're still the strongest person I know. Kate smiled sadly. Am I, or am I just a woman who's been manipulated by everyone she loved? You're a woman who survived everything that was thrown at her and came out the other side standing. That's not weakness, Kate. That's power. Kate hung up. She thought about power. She thought about all the ways it could be wielded. Through money. Through silence. Through love. Her mother had used all three. So had Kate. Maybe they weren't so different after all. 3 weeks later, Kate received a letter. It was from a law firm in Boston, her mother's law firm. She opened it at her kitchen table in Florence, coffee growing cold beside her. Dear Ms. Reynolds, Peer, the instructions left by your mother. Eleanor Reynolds, this letter is to be delivered on the first anniversary of your divorce from Richard Harrington. Enclosed, you will find the original documentation of the Reynolds Family Trust, including amendments made by your mother in the final year of her life. Your mother wished for you to know that the investment in Harrington Technologies was made with full knowledge of the risks involved. She believed that the experience, whatever form it took, would ultimately lead you to discover your own strength. She also wished for you to have the enclosed personal letter written in her own hand to be delivered only when she felt you were ready to receive it. With respect, Morrison and Associates. Kate's hands trembled as she pulled out the second envelope. Her mother's handwriting. Familiar. Beloved. Gone for 12 years but suddenly present again. My darling Kate. If you're reading this, then things have unfolded as I suspected they might. Richard was always a gamble. But you, my love, were never a gamble. You were a certainty. I know you're angry. I know you feel manipulated. I know you're wondering if anything in your life was real. Let me tell you what was real. Your talent is real. Your strength is real. Your capacity for love, even when it hurts, is real. I gave Richard money and opportunity, but I could not give him your love. That was yours to give freely, and you gave it. That makes it real. I arranged your meeting, but I could not make you happy. The years of joy you shared, the laughter, the partnership, those were real. And when Richard failed you, when he broke your heart, the courage you found to rebuild yourself, that was real too. That was all you. I'm sorry for my deception. I'm sorry I didn't trust you with the truth. I was afraid. Afraid you'd refuse the help. Afraid you'd spend your life taking care of me instead of living. Mothers make mistakes, Kate. Even when we think we know best. Especially then. But know this, everything I did because I believed in you. I believed you were capable of extraordinary things. And I was right. Go live your extraordinary life, my darling. Fall in love again. Build something beautiful. Let the past go. You've already won. Now it's time to enjoy the victory. All my love, forever. Mom. Kate read the letter 3 times. Then she cried. Deep heaving sobs that shook her entire body. She cried for her mother. She cried for Richard. She cried for the young woman who had walked into a coffee shop 23 years ago full of hope, not knowing that her entire life had been orchestrated. And then she stopped crying. She wiped her face. She made fresh coffee. She walked to the window and looked out at the city she had chosen as her new home. Florence stretched before her, ancient and beautiful and full of possibility. Her mother had been right about one thing. Kate was capable of extraordinary things. It was time to prove it. 1 year later. Kate stood at a podium in a gleaming new building in downtown San Francisco. The sign above the door read, Reynolds Foundation for Technological Innovation. Reporters filled the room. Tech executives, government officials, students from universities around the world. Thank you all for being here today, Kate said into the microphone. 1 year ago, I released the source code for an artificial intelligence system to the world. I did it because I believed that technology should serve humanity, not the other way around. She paused, looking out at the faces before her. That code has now been downloaded over 50 million times. It's being used in hospitals in rural Africa. It's optimizing disaster relief in Southeast Asia. It's helping researchers in Antarctica track climate change. It belongs to everyone now, and that's exactly how it should be. Applause rippled through the room. Today I'm announcing the Reynolds Foundation. Our mission is to fund and support open-source technology projects that address the world's most pressing problems. We're starting with a $100 million endowment, and we're just getting started. More applause. Louder now. I spent 23 years in the shadows, Kate continued. I let someone else take credit for my work. I stayed silent when I should have spoken. I shrank myself so someone else could feel bigger. She gripped the podium. Never again. This foundation bears my name because I earned that name, not through inheritance, not through marriage, through work, through sacrifice, through refusing to give up even when everything seemed lost. She looked directly into the camera. To every woman who has ever been told she's not enough, to every person who has ever been overlooked, underestimated, dismissed, this foundation is for you. Your voice matters. Your work matters. You matter. The room erupted in applause. Kate smiled. A real smile. The first one in a very long time. After the press conference, Kate found herself alone on the rooftop of the building. The sun was setting over San Francisco Bay. Golden light spilled across the water, turning everything to fire. Her phone buzzed. James. Congratulations, ma'am. The coverage is overwhelmingly positive. You're trending worldwide. Thank you, James. There's one more thing. Richard Harrington was released from prison this morning. Early release for good behavior. Kate's breath caught. Where is he? Unknown. He refused to speak to the press. He simply walked out and disappeared. Kate looked out at the bay. Richard was free. After 5 years, he was back in the world. A world that had forgotten him completely. She wondered what he would do, where he would go, whether he would find peace or simply fade into obscurity. She realized she didn't hate him anymore. She didn't love him either. She felt nothing at all. And that she understood was the real freedom. That night, Kate had dinner with Maggie at a restaurant overlooking the water. They drank wine and laughed about old times. Maggie told stories about her grandchildren. Kate talked about her plans for the foundation. You seem different, Maggie said finally. Lighter. I am lighter. No more ghosts. Kate thought about it. The ghosts are still there. My mother, Richard, the woman I used to be. But they don't haunt me anymore. They're just part of the story. And what's the next chapter? Kate smiled. I don't know yet. That's the beautiful part. They clinked glasses. To not knowing, Maggie said. To not knowing. Late that night, Kate walked alone on the beach. The waves crashed against the shore. The stars blazed overhead. She felt small against the vastness of the ocean, but not in a diminishing way, in a freeing way. She thought about everything she had lost: her marriage, her anonymity, the simple life she had tried to build. She thought about everything she had gained: her voice, her purpose, herself. The trade had been worth it. Her phone buzzed one last time. A text from an unknown number. "Thank you for the second chance. I won't waste it. R." Kate stared at the message for a long moment. Then she deleted it. Richard Harrington was part of her past now, a chapter that had ended, a lesson that had been learned. She put her phone in her pocket and walked toward the water. The waves lapped at her feet, cold and alive. She had spent 23 years being someone's wife, someone's shadow, someone's silent partner. Now she was just Kate Reynolds, and that was more than enough. She turned and walked back toward the lights of the city. Her city now, her life now. Behind her, the ocean continued its eternal rhythm, washing away footprints, making everything new. Kate Reynolds had started her life in silence. She would live the rest of it out loud,